I we're recording. I see someone named Kelly and Brett. As soon as we're finished with the slides, I'll put off my screen share and then I'll be able to see a few more people. If in fact, the audio goes funny, please alert me, Chris, because I can only see you now. But thank you, first of all, for having me today. Je suis très excitée d'être ici. J'ai étudié le français à UVic. Et j'adore Québec parce que j'ai passé 3 étés en Québec. I spent 3 summers learning French for my French degree from UVic, and I adore Quebec. It's really fantastic that I get to connect with some educators from Quebec. So thank you for having me today. And indeed, I'm going to be talking about my work with studying imagination in the context of ecological learning and how we can make that accessible for educators, K-12, and how we can support student learning. So as I go along, please add any comments or questions to the chat, and I'm going to ask Chris to help me moderate that, but there will be time for questions at the end, and I'm just really pleased to be here, and I thank you for having me. I do want to acknowledge very sincerely that I am coming to you from the unceded and ancestral territories of the Kwantlen, Katzie, and Semiahmoo First Nations people. I live in a place called Surrey, British Columbia. If any of you have been to British Columbia, you may know where that is. And you may have seen on the news that we were ravaged yesterday with a very intense storms. We fared fairly well. One thing I have felt throughout this whole pandemic is a deep appreciation for the land and the place where I do get to live as an uninvited guest. I don't know if others have felt this way, but being able to walk or breathe and center ourselves in the natural world during this pandemic and during all of the anxiety that has come along with it, it really, really has been a way that I have expanded and deepened my understanding of the local environment in which I'm in. So I'm very sincerely grateful for where I live. So I want to situate the work I'm going to be explaining. And to do that, I need to describe something that happened for me when I was a teacher in an urban school. The school was at the center of a city. It was considered a challenging school, but I never felt of it that way because the students just surprised me every day with their passion for learning and for life. And I taught French. I was teaching French at the time. And actually on this particular day, I had just finished a riveting lesson on the passé composé, and my students were heading out of the classroom. One particular student, his name was Ryan, and Ryan was a very good student. He had a full scholarship to university. He was very studious. He was very kind, very respectful. And on this particular day, he was heading out of the classroom, and all he had to pass to get this freedom was 2 very large blue recycling bins, a very small black dented garbage can, and me. And as he's heading out of the room, he's flipping a plastic water bottle. And as per usual, he thanked me for my lesson. He said, "You know what, Madame Judson, just thank you so much for your lesson today." And I said, "Oh, you're welcome, Ryan." And then he proceeded to throw his plastic water bottle into that teeny tiny dented black garbage can. And on every other day, I was used to fishing things out and sorting them. But on this day, I asked him to stop. And I said, "Hey, Ryan, what are you doing?" Now, this student wasn't used to being called out. So he was sort of initially upset. "Oh, I'm sorry, Madame J, I'm sorry." And I said, "No, but seriously, why wouldn't you recycle this bottle?" And he just said to me, "With all due respect, what's it got to do with me?" My chin hit the floor. What's it got to do with me? He had complete and utter emotional disaffection with environmental crises. He could describe what was going on in the world. He could describe why recycling was rationally important, but he had no emotional connection to local places. He had no emotional connection to larger issues. And we know that people are not moved to action unless they feel something. And so this is where I started with my research. It's when I was a high school teacher in an urban school, and that's when I started my doctoral studies. And my question was, what is required, excuse me, to educate for ecological understanding? Ecological understanding is a term. Others use the term ecological awareness, ecological consciousness, but essentially what is required to educate so that we feel a sense of deep connection to the natural world and also have knowledge about it and the will to live differently, the will to behave differently. So this was the question I pursued during my doctoral studies. And at the end of those studies, I'm very simplifying here, I realized that there are three sort of facets that we need in an educational approach that will help cultivate ecological understanding. And those principles are at the heart of the work I'm going to be describing today. Feeling, activeness, and place are those three principles. Essentially, the moments that most shape our ecological understanding are moments that engage our emotions, our imaginations, and the body in particular contexts. Now, I have to excuse me. Bad news, I have a cold. Good news, I just found out I do not have COVID. That test result came in like 20 minutes ago, but I'm going to need some water. Okay, so this is what kind of an educational experience that we need to provide for our learners is what I'm suggesting. Now, at the heart of that is this notion of imagination. And it's surprising for some that imagination needs to be part of this kind of education. And for many people, imagination isn't something we take seriously in education, much past primary school. Imagination is really misunderstood in education. And the problem is that we oftentimes take some small aspect of imagination. It might be the fantasy life of a child or artists or dancers, and we assume that that is imagination. Well, imagination is much more profoundly at the heart of what we do as human beings. So part of my work, even outside of imaginative and ecological practices, is how do we bring imagination back into the center of our conversations in education? So I'd like us to consider imagination in more of a Vygotskian way. It is the basis of all creative activity. So it is as important in the sciences and in mathematics and in engineering and in literacy development and in numeracy than it is in the arts. If we look at imagination in the fulsome way in which many researchers do, we see that it is not just the possession of the few. It is certainly not just something children employ, but it is much more profoundly human. And so at the heart of my practice is, in fact, imagination. Because we have to talk about imagination in teaching. And this is something that is less common in educational conversations, because we tend to think about imagination as possibly a distraction. I would argue imagination is a requirement for learning anything at all. It's a requirement for learning Physics 12 as much as it is for learning creative writing. And so why is that? Well, this was a quote I learned early on in my studies from psychologist Dr. David Kresh. And he said, human beings never just think. He said, human beings perceive and they feel and they think at the same time. And he used the word per-thinker. They perceive and they feel and they think. So if we think about our students that way, if you conceive of your students as per-thinkers, and you know that they feel at the heart of everything that is most meaningful and memorable to them, then we need to more routinely engage emotion. We need to more routinely engage the imagination of the learners in our classrooms. And so this is why feeling is at the heart of the practice I'm describing. I propose that without emotional engagement, there is no learning, because it is actually feeling that moves us to action. It's feeling that develops our sense of agency. It's feeling connected to place that has us live differently in the world. Now, within this principle, I've really worked closely with the work of Dr. Kieran Egan, and I'm not sure if many of you are aware of his work for many years on teaching as storytelling. And so this is where we need to consider, how do we engage per-thinkers? How do we engage those feeling beings that are in front of us in our classrooms? And his answer is that we need to make teaching more like storytelling. We need to use tools of storytellers, and those tools are cognitive tools. They're things like rhythms and patterns and mysteries and wonder and stories, of course, heroic qualities, potential drama. These are all features of the great stories we most enjoy in the world. But Kieran Egan and his work with initially the Imaginative Education Research Group, but later the Center for Imagination in Research, Culture, and Education, these are all tools we can use to engage imagination. And I have given you a resource, and I know Chris has shared it out with you today, so you would have received it in an email. These are all tools we can use to engage the emotions of the learners in front of us, whether we take them outside or not. These are all tools we can use to help engage the perfinkers in front of us. And I'm going to ask you to look at this handout when we go into small groups, because at the heart of this imaginative and ecological education approach, that is teaching in a way that supports ecological understanding, is the idea that we're going to engage imagination. And I know in many circles, people will say, yes, it's important we engage imagination, but there's no practical tools to do it. And that is what these offer. These are practical tools to engage imagination, to engage and grow imagination in teaching. So I'm going to ask that we look at that in a few minutes. Excuse me. The second principle that I believe is at the heart of a way of teaching that helps connect us to the natural world, I've called activeness. And activeness is a term used by a deep ecologist named Arne Naess. And he said there's two different ways in which we engage with the world as human beings. One is being active, and the other is activeness. So when you think about arguments in the world for preserving forests or preserving parks, oftentimes you'll hear reasons that connect back to how human beings use those places. We need parks because we like to camp in them, we like to run in them, we like to hike in them. And so we can be active in the natural world. And that's one way we can live in the natural world. But Arne Naess says that's not necessarily the way that you'll most profoundly connect to nature. It's not the way that you'll most feel that you are embedded in a living world. So he says this other way of relating, activeness, is a slower, more internal kind of connection. And it's when we come to realize that we are relational, we are part of a connection in a living world. And this connects us clearly to a message at the heart of Indigenous pedagogies, is that all are relations. But we need to slow down and experience the body's engagement in the world. And so that is what the activeness principle calls to our attention. So to review, we have feeling. We need imagination in our practice. We need to use cognitive tools. Secondly, we need to engage the body, because the body provides us with a profound set of tools for learning, and it can help us viscerally and emotionally experience the world of which we are part. And the third principle is one about place. Now, place is not simply a context. Place are those spaces in the world which have emotional significance for us. And what's very interesting is that we are placemakers. Human beings are profoundly placemakers. And what that means is we tend to develop emotional connection and meaning to the context in which we live our lives. So when I'm talking about place-based education, I want to really situate my work. I am a white settler who has studied a Western perspective of ecological education. So if we take all of Western education historically, there is a sliver of work that looks at place-based pedagogies, that looks at ecological pedagogies, pedagogies that connect and acknowledge the interconnectedness of human beings in the world. But whereas in Western culture, this is a sliver, if we look to and learn from our Indigenous colleagues and Indigenous worldviews and pedagogies, we know that that connection between place, land, and self and learning is inextricable. So it is part of my work now, in an ongoing way, to bridge and connect with my Indigenous colleagues, to understand how this aligns or does not with Indigenous perspectives. There are some clear connections that focus on place, but I know that Indigenous pedagogies also offer another layer of richness. And so what I'm doing, and I'll discuss later, is some of the work I'm doing now is bridging this walking curriculum with Indigenous notions of place and land-based learning. In terms of my work, though, a short-term aim of the walking curriculum, which I'm about to dive into, is that we really want to increase learners' familiarity with the local environment. By increasing familiarity of a placemaker, you help develop an emotional connection. It's all about developing relationships between the learners and the land. We want learners to not go into their schoolyards feeling like, oh, it's just a schoolyard, there's nothing wild here, to have them emotionally receptive, to help open their minds and hearts to what is possible, how we might learn with and in place. That's the short-term aim. And I think by increasing the ways in which we engage with learning outside, it makes it much more possible. In the long term, however, the long goal is that we push the boundaries of how we tend to think about learning and teaching from a Western perspective. And that is, and it may sound odd to some of us here today, is that we can consider and must ultimately look to place as a co-teacher, or as Sean Blenkinsop would say, a silent teacher. So there's bigger implications with this notion of place-focused learning, and a much larger role for the natural cultural context in the learning process itself. And so this is a quote that really frames the particular practice today I'm talking about of walking curriculum. I've been introducing the overall theoretical perspective, which is imaginative eco-ed, but the very specific thing we're going to look at now is a walking curriculum. I love this quote by Gary Snyder. He says, "We learn a place and how to visualize place through spatial relationships as children, on foot and with imagination. Place and the scale of place must be measured against our bodies and their capabilities." And it was this quote for me that had me first explore, well, how are we going to move learning outside in ways that engage imagination, in ways that engage the body, and in ways that connect to place? How are we going to do that? And I think it has to happen as frequently as possible in the K-12 system to have the most impact. So then the short answer, what is the walking curriculum? This is what maybe we're all here to hear about. The short answer is it's a set of walks. There's 60 imagination and inquiry focused walks. These walks engage the body, emotion, and imagination in learning, and they increase students' awareness of place and their attention to detail in place. The goal is that students become hoarders of detail, that become more and more aware of the details and intricacies of the places in which they're living and learning. It supports interdisciplinary learning, and it is meant to inspire further place-based teaching. And the long answer, which I've kind of alluded to, is that this is about imagination in learning. Imagination matters, emotion matters. It's about feeling, it's about engaging the body and place, and it's not a set of a checkbox. It's not like we do the 60 walks and we're done. It's meant to sort of shift the way you might look at your curriculum. How can we teach anything in a way that engages the body, emotion, and imagination in place? So it's much more of a methodology than a simple list of walks to complete. But what you'll notice if you haven't seen the walking curriculum before, is there's an inquiry question, and then there's one of these cognitive tools. And a lot of educators love to do the walk, the inquiry, but they don't often or as often do the follow-up activity. But it's the follow-up activity that is using that cognitive tool to engage imagination. So the two together are more effective. So I think I've talked a long time. I'm kind of on track here, Chris. We're at 12:52. So in your small groups, there's a couple of questions you might look at. The first, and maybe you want to take a photo of this so you have the question in front of you, or maybe jot it down. The question is, how can outdoor learning engage and grow imagination? Or if you want to flip it in your group, how can imagination support outdoor learning? And while you're having your conversation, I would be curious if you looked at that handout and noticed, how could you use some of these tools? How could you use these tools that engage and grow imagination to in fact support outdoor learning, or to support the teaching of your curriculum? So that's what I'm going to ask that you talk about in small groups. And I'll just give you 5 more seconds here to take a look at this, and then I'll close my screen share, and Chris will send us off into small groups for maybe 15 minutes, because then we'll have a bit longer to have a final group discussion. Okay, I'm going to close this. Now I can see the big screen. If anybody would like to put their video on for just a second, I would love that. Oh, I see Heather. Hello, Heather. Hi, Amy, Christine. Bonjour, bonjour. Hi, Julie. So, Chris, if you're there. Oh, lots more people. Hello, bonjour, bonjour. Hi, Craig, Perry, Vicky. It's nice to see the faces.
Yes, I put the document in. Some people might see it as a picture. I did attach it to the email I sent you all this morning as well, and I just put it in the Google Drive and made it shareable. So you have 3 different ways you can get to that document. Yeah.
Perfect. So maybe before we go out into the small group, does anyone have a burning question that I could address, or a comment or anything that might get in the way of your discussion in your small group? They told me at UVic when I did my teacher training that I need to give appropriate wait time. So I'll give appropriate wait time.
Gillian, would you mind repeating those 2 questions you wanted us to ponder and discuss when we break out?
Yes.
Just so we're all clear.
So it's sort of a flip side. How can outdoor learning, so how can learning outside engage and grow imagination? Or flip it, how can imagination support outdoor learning? And when I'm talking about outdoor learning, I'm not talking about your biology curriculum or a botany curriculum. I'm talking about whatever you teach, you can move that outdoors with imagination, with engagement of emotion. So keep in mind your math curriculum. If you want to do more math outdoors, or creative writing outdoors, or science or language arts, whatever it might be, how can imagination help you do that? That's why these cognitive tools might help your discussion. Okay, so why don't we do 15 minutes and come back at just before 2:15? Or no?
Sounds good.
Your time is different than mine. 1:15.
We have about half an hour to go, so why don't we take about 15 minutes in, and then we can all come back and discuss together for about 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, I should say. Yeah, so Michael will just randomly throw us into, well, not throw us, he'll gently place us into breakout rooms.
And then we understand why it's called Zoom.
Right on. Great.
Chris?
Seems we have a few people who weren't assigned, so I'm just going to manually drop you into rooms, okay? Try to make it as equitable as possible. If you get a little notification, please click OK.
I'll have a quick word with you, Michael, once you're done that.
Absolutely. It'll be done in just a few moments. Okay. Audrey, Michelle. Okay, good. Michelle, you should have a notification on your screen.
If anybody's joined by phone, it can be very hard to accept an invitation into a room. I've experienced this. So yes. Perhaps Monique is on a phone. Michelle, are you having trouble getting the room?
Yes, it keeps telling me it's timing out and won't let me in.
Won't let you in. It's timing out and won't let you in. Okay, I'm gonna put you into the waiting room and then we'll let you back in here. It might just be a bug, okay?
Okay, perfect.
All right, let's see.
Sorry, I'm still in my classroom. School just ended.
No sweat.
Look good in the mask.
Okay, 1 second. Hey there, Michelle. I'm going to try to assign you again.
Is it working?
She has the request.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what to say. Michelle, look for, oh, you said you're getting a timeout, eh?
She
I don't know
might,
what to tell you. Yeah.
maybe she should sign out again and maybe try to join in on Chrome or Firefox
Yeah,
possibly.
it seems like an application issue, like if you're using a phone or if you're using.
Are you using Safari, Michelle, as your server? Okay. I would say
And if they're not coming, that means the conversation's good.
yes. Welcome back. This is why they call it Zoom, right?
Yeah, teleportation in the real world.
I think so. Chris, I think we noticed a problem with the link that you initially sent. It only showed page 1
Oh,
of
okay.
the document rather than the whole 6-page document. But Michael,
Yeah, it was. I think it was a fail, but I think I fixed it. I think so. I'm gonna put that document again in the chat, and you guys tell me if it's the right one. I have a lot of people that can review it, so I just linked it up, and this should be the PDF with all the links and the information that. Because it was 4 documents, right, Julian? I think
it was a six page. Now you have all the connections. It's got some useful resources for learning a little bit more. It has those tools and it has some sample walks as well. I had said to Chris, maybe we could go out and do some walking, but an hour doesn't give us that much time. Right. So welcome back. I would love to now hear a little bit about what you were talking about in your rooms, and then also if I can respond to any questions or comments based on this real warp speed introduction to the resource. I don't know if the people from the Learn Quebec team want to kind of report back from what was talked about in the rooms or initiate that. I'm game for anything.
Well, yes, we could. And one person that loves to report back a lot is Mr. Craig Bullitt, because he takes really good notes about almost everything that's said. He'll put in the notes. So I'm going to pass
Craig's been
it to him.
voluntold. You've been you're the volunteer.
Thank you, Chris, so much. I didn't take a single note, and we weren't able to open stuff. But anyway, we did have a nice conversation about getting outside, and beautiful question that came up is, why do we feel the way we do? So we were saying all these special feelings that we have when we go outside, and we tried to answer it together, or we asked it amongst ourselves, and then we thought, what a perfect question to bring to the students, right? To hear different perspectives, to just go outside. And so how does it feel to be out here, first of all, even if we closed our eyes and just listened for a spell, to sounds that we hear, and list those things off, and how does it feel, and why does it feel that way? So it was just that beautiful question to put out to students, as we're trying to answer it for ourselves. It is a special place. There's a special feeling about being out there, and so what is it? It would be fun to talk about.
Absolutely. I mean, for ecological theorists and educators would say that when you're indoors, you're detached from your full humanity. We are fully human within and connected to the natural world of which we're part. So we know from, I'm not sure if you're aware of Richard Louve's work, he's written about nature deficit. He says, you know, for some children, and maybe you've met these children, I know some, they're very uncomfortable outside because there's so little time is spent outside. Their free time, their relaxed time, their creative time tends to be screen time. So we have a special role to play in enhancing that relationship, in introducing that relationship to other people, other children, and just allowing them to realize how they feel differently outside. There's many, many studies that show the benefits of it. But I think you're right, Craig, and whatever group you were in, that it's important to take time to dwell there, support the kids who are having a little bit of trouble enjoying that space. But it's all part of being outdoor educators. We don't need to have a botany degree to help kids become a bit more comfortable learning outdoors. So thank you. Another group, share a comment or question or a thought. If I randomly call on someone, then look at all the videos go off suddenly. Oh, Kathleen has such a nice smile. Kathleen, what do you think?
You read my mind that I was about to unmute. That was well done. Chris, did you message her? Call on Kathleen. She likes to talk. It's nice to see you, Chris, by the way. It's been a really long time. We used to work together a lot. I had a math and science dossier before, and now I'm ELA. So I just have to say that while I have you there. Our group, we had like just a nice conversation. The links weren't live and whatnot, but we just started sharing what we've already done ourselves. And that in itself was rich to see how it was applicable from K all the way to CEGEP. I've already stolen a bunch of ideas that got me really excited. And we talked a bit about the idea of, well, actually, I don't remember. I said something and Julie Paré was like, that's a good point, but I don't actually know what I said. Julie, do you want to?
I can speak French, right? Ce qui était important ici, c'était la régularité. We need to go out the first time. And the first time, it's probably as uncomfortable for the kids than for the teacher as well. So I think we have to go little baby steps, little step, and le faire de façon régulière. I think that's the key, you know, so we get used to that. As much the kids will get used, then the teacher as well, because we're stuck inside the classroom all the time, and we need to rediscover to be outside. So that was mainly what you were saying, Kathleen. La régularité, d'y aller souvent, fréquemment, you know, to get used to that, reused to that, to be outside like that.
Okay, I did say that. I did.
So, two things. One, I'm just so happy I understood her, and that means my French degree was not wasted. So that is awesome. Secondly, so important. And so part of the resource outlines how do we prepare for this, because we need to have things in place. This is not the way many children think about learning math or science. Imagine taking a group of grade 10 students outdoors. They think that it's time off rather than an extension or development of the curriculum. Younger children, if they begin in K by always doing some of their learning outdoors, similarly grade 2, grade 3, they're much more willing and see that as on time, not off time. So what has to happen? Well, we need, as educators, we need to be very familiar with the schoolyards into which we're moving. So what does collaboration look like on your professional learning days? It might be spending time outdoors with colleagues, looking for the affordances of the place, looking for the ways in which you can connect. So that is one way to make it more successful. A second thing we need to do is to set the imaginative context, because for most of the learners, it's just the boring old schoolyard. We need to turn them on to the fact that it is full of wonder. And truthfully, if I sit in my home, which is near a school, and try to think of ways to do things in the schoolyard, I come up with very little. When I just go out in the schoolyard and begin to engage my own senses and notice what's there, I'm always overwhelmed with the opportunity. So we need to get out there and notice what we can't. Challenge students to see something different every single time. And when we use the walking curriculum, if they're exploring the schoolyard, maybe the first time they're looking for lines, the next time they're looking for hiding places, the next time they're looking for corners, the next time they're looking at borders, then they're looking at colors, then they're looking at the vertical world, then they're looking at roots. And each of these walks is a way to have them notice something different. We must have our administrators on board supporting us. We need our parents to know what's going on, and parents, I've got a letter available with my previous walking curriculum challenge. It's easy letter you can send to parents. Says this is the rationale, this is the pedagogical value of learning outside. We need to be equipped, certainly in a Quebec winter, but even on just a wet day, we need to be able to keep the kids dry. And so maybe they need to bring little boots, or maybe the older kids need to know they need jackets or umbrellas that day. So making it focused and being prepared. And the other piece I want to bring in is that we need to think also how to extend the learning. I got an email from someone the other day and I started reading it and I felt really good. It said, "Hi, Gillian, I just want you to know that I really love the walking curriculum. Here I am feeling yay." And then she said, "It's so important that kids have a break from learning." Oh, I thought, that's exactly not what this is. Kids need a break. So give them recess, of course, and lunch, and leave them alone. But this is an extension of your math curriculum, your science, your literacy, your language arts. So we need to think of ways, and what works really well, if when students return to the classroom, if they're missing important knowledge that they should have gained from learning outside, then they're not going to be prepared for it. So they need to know that. Anyway, I'm babbling on. We've got about 8 minutes. I know it's at the end of your day, so you're ready to go put on your parent, guardian, pet parent, children parent duties. But other comments or questions before I have just some concluding slides? I see Camille has her hand up.
Yes, I had a question actually while we were in the group. Do you have a Facebook page with do you have a community of teachers doing this kind of thing? Because oftentimes I find it's just that you're racking your brain to find a little activity, like not something that's going to take 3 hours, because you don't have 3 hours, right? But starting points. And I find that, when you see a photo or a little video of what they did or little things like that, it really, really helps you imagine what has to be set up and how to go about it and how to divide the task and prepare, like you said.
Okay, so multiple answers to that. If you've seen have you seen the walking curriculum before, the actual resource?
The book, no.
Okay, so I'm quickly going to share my screen. Where is this? Because on the handout that you have access to, it includes a few of the walks. So if you're interested in very quick and easy ways to do things, this is the feeling rooted walk. So you have them go out with looking, what do you find has roots? What do you notice about roots? And then you develop those ideas looking at how we feel rooted as families and communities, etc. Another quick activity, the corners walk, looking for different corners, and then looking metaphorically and with a sense of humor. When do we feel cornered as human beings, et cetera, et cetera. So the walking curriculum has 60 of those quick ways to go outside paired with a learning activity. To respond to your other part of your question, Facebook has not been my friend, unfortunately. I do have a group on there called Imaginative Ecological Education. And if you look up that Facebook group, we'll welcome you into that group. For some reason, Facebook has identified my blog, which is called Imaginative. It is said it is evil and dangerous, and they won't let me share anything on it onto Facebook. And since Facebook doesn't have any actual humans working there, nobody's responded to any of my questions about why this blog with teaching ideas is evil. So I can't share from my blog to Facebook. I don't do it very much.
Okay, so your blog is called Imaginative Ecological.
I'm going to share that in just a second. I have some slides for you. I'm just talking, but the community, if you're on Twitter, that's where you're going to get examples. There's a massive following on Twitter, and you would just follow the walking curriculum hashtag. That's where people that have done the challenges are doing it. That's where you can see how different people are engaging the work. And also, I've formally created a very walking curriculum community email list based on feedback from people that are using it. So if you'd like to be added to that, I send out learning opportunities to people. And I think what I was going to ask Chris to do is, if you're interested in having your email added to that list, tell Chris and he could just send me a list of names and I will add you all to that email list. Maybe, Chris, what I'll do now is I'll show the slides that indicate where people can learn a little bit more. I know it's been a warp speed introduction, but I think it's a good place to start. Is that so, Camille? You'll get your answers now when I share my.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, so back to where we were, and I'm just gonna go to, oops, sorry. I'm just gonna go to this here. Okay, learn more. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, where I do a lot of tweeting about the walking curriculum, I am at @perfinker. That shouldn't be a surprise. I tweet a lot, and it's all for work related and walking curriculum. If you have questions or comments to follow up, please email me. There's my email, and Chris will collect emails if you'd like to be part of a specific group. If you want to learn more about the walking curriculum, this is the blog I'm referring to, educationthatinspires.ca. It's not just about imagination in outdoor learning, it's about imagination in leadership, pedagogy, K-12, post-secondary. There's all kinds of posts, many hundred written by educators that are engaging the tools of imagination. And there's a whole section on the walking curriculum, a lot of free and described activities, a lot of resources that you might want to check out. If you want to get a monthly update, then subscribe and you'll get an email once a month, which shows all the new things happening. These are 3 books I've published on this approach. The one on the left is the one I wrote right out of my doctoral work. It's quite theoretical, and I think the only person who's ever bought one is my mom. And so it may not be the first best access point. The second book I wrote as part of a research project. There's an outdoor school here in BC that has no walls. There is no building. It's K7, it's fully outdoors. And so my work was, how do we teach kids to read outdoors fully? How do we enhance reading outdoors fully? So it applies the principles of feeling, activeness, and place. And then the third book is one I self-published, which is available in different places. And it's the one that has the very practical set of activities. If you want to support a nonprofit, the books are available through the Outdoor Learning Store. And any profit goes back into education across the country. So those are some resources if you'd like to learn more. And there's lots on the blog that's all free as well. But this is going to be really cool. There's a webinar if you're interested. It's on November 17th. And I have 8 educators that are using these practices. And they're going to say, you know, they all started out with what if and how do I's, and they now are using the work, and they all did research on this as part of their master's degrees. So I'm going to be facilitating a conversation with all of these fantastic educators. So if you want to hear more about how educators are actually using the practices, please join us. The link to sign up, www.outdoorlearningstore.ca, and then under workshops. And then actually, I just put a post out yesterday on Imagine that gives a few other ways you can learn more, an online short course, et cetera, et cetera. All right.
Great.
So that,
wow. That's a blitz.
That's a lot. That's a blitz. That's a blah.
I am going to make it easy for you guys. I will send you an email with all those links in it, to her website, to the registration, to that webinar, which now I have another webinar to attend. And I'll share all that out. So if you didn't get it all down, don't worry. I also recorded this so that we can put it on our Learn resources if you want to come rewatch or have a friend have a look at it. It'll all be out there. We want to keep it for learning. All right, giveaway time before we all send you off to your children and dogs and dinner. And cats, I guess, too. You don't walk a cat, though. But so, Gillian, give us a question.
I'm ready.
Or something we talked about
Yes.
over this session. I want everybody to open your chat up, put your cursor in, get your fingers on the tap touche. On the
Yes, get your ready. You're ready to add to the chat to win the prize. Okay, the first
question. We will
question.
auction off the first English book.
The first English book. I would like to know, in the word perfinker, what is the middle F stand for? Oh, okay, we have a winner. Brett was the first to say feel. Nice.
Nice.
Okay.
Brett, I'll tell you about the address in a minute. Go ahead, Julie. The next English book. We'll do the French one.
Next question. Deep ecologist R. Nace said there's two ways we engage with the world. One is being active. One is yes, Kathleen Murray, activeness. Nice job, Kathleen.
Nice, Kathleen.
This is
we
going
have
to be okay. This is a
one
hard
more
one.
English.
This is a hard one. I just got test results back. What was my test on? Yes, COVID, right? Oh, this is fun.
Did we get who that was?
Me showed too.
Okay, excellent.
And there's one more resource, right?
Yeah, our French book.
This is tough. C'est difficile. Je vais poser la question en français. Is that fair if I do it en français?
Bien
or does
sûr.
that exclude anyone? Is it okay?
Oui, c'est
Okay.
bien.
Okay. Excuse the typos that I'm going to give you verbally. Dans l'histoire, j'ai commencé avec une histoire avec un étudiant qui était un très bon étudiant, mais n'aimait pas la terre. Son nom était
Sarah.
Oh my goodness, Craig, you are sharp. It was Ryan.
No, Craig can't win the book. He's hard to learn.
Oh man,
Sarah.
I'm gonna get it anyway.
He broke the rules.
Sarah
I think we
can.
had Sarah, right? Sarah
Brilliant.
Binet.
That was fun.
Okay, so Sarah Binet, you have one French copy. Now, Gillian, thank you.
Merci.
I hope we can do this encore une autre fois ici aux Belles Provinces. Peut-être on va parler pour 2022.
Absolutely.
Right. It's really amazing stuff. Lots of aha moments, and we just need more. You could see the hunger's here. We need more. So we will have those discussions. I want to thank all of you guys for joining us today. It's short and sweet, but there's a lot of things to think about, and keep your eye on the ground. We will send out other information about up and coming sessions that will be happening. And we'll keep them relatively broad based, but we'll also keep them within an hour so that it doesn't dominate your whole day and you don't need release. The people that won their book, if you wouldn't mind sending me your address in the chat before you leave, you can send a direct message to me so you don't have everybody here showing up at your door wanting to convince you to give them the book. So just send it directly to me and we'll get those out to you. And I wish you all a great evening, and we will be in touch really soon. All of us, we will find our way to seeing each other again, I am sure.
Merci.
Thanks a lot, guys.
Everybody. Thanks.
Merci, Gillian. Merci. C'était fantastique.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. We'll be in touch.
Yes. Take care. Have a great rest of the day, Gillian. Nice seeing you. Thank
Bye.
you so much again.
Gillian, thank you, Chris.
Oh, thanks, Kelly. I hope that you got something from it. I mean, I think
Always.
it was pretty cool.
Oh, yes. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. I've done the 30-day challenge. It's great.